Hello and welcome to a crafty vlog that I'm going to do today. So today I'm going to be following one of these Quilt-as-you-go June Tailor kits. I'm going to have a few of these in the shop. I've not bought very many, but I thought I'd give it a go using some of the fat quarter bundles that I've been selling on my website, the Liberty ones. So I'm going to give it a go, see if I can do it in slightly less fabric than it actually says on the list, and show you any sort of tips and tricks that I do differently from what the instructions say. Now there is a video tutorial. Oh, I have done it. Now there is a video tutorial already on the internet for the June Tailor kits, but I will I'll brush over those sort of details because you can watch that as well, but I will talk about anything that I change and how difficult I think it is to actually sew for those beginner sewers. So there is some fabric. So there is a piece of wadding that's got the pattern printed on it in the kit. It's got the panel that you use for the main body of the actual bag, and there's some pieces for the straps of wadding. There's some cotton webbing for the straps as well, and there's your full instructions of how to do it. So I'm going to follow the instructions and let you know how I get on, and sort of take you with me at the same time as well. So it looks like it's going to be a really nice bag. I am going to use, so this is the latest April set of fat quarters that I've got on my website from the Liberty prints, which are the quilters cottons made by Liberty. The sets come in sets of 5, so I've got those, and I've got a fat quarter of another one of the Emily Bell prints in a pink that goes really well with this. So I've added that to make 6 fat quarters. I don't know whether I'll see if I can get away with doing 5, and so that I can see if you can get away with using your sort of fat quarter bundle. And I've got just ½ metre of fabric for the lining. It does say that you need 3/4 yard, but because I cut my ½ meters generously, I cut them at 20.5 inches, so that should just be enough if you have a ½ meter from my shop. I'm going to start cutting 2.5 inch strips of these fabrics. I'm going to try, like I said, I'm going to try and not use that 6th fat quarter though, and see how it goes. But it gives you a list here of how many pieces you need. So you need cut 2.5 inch strips for all these pieces. There's a sort of a diagram of how the lines are on the actual wadding, and it tells you that you need them in various lengths. So they start from sort of 7 or 4 inches as the shortest piece, and then there's a 22 inch piece for the longest section that you need, which is these number 26 and number 27 down here and here. So I think I should be alright, because if I half of a fat quarter, the actual width of the fabric is more than 22 inches anyway when I cut it, so I'm sure I can just get away with using the fat quarters rather than using, they actually say to use 1/4 yard, so a straight cut rather than a fat quarter, but I think that's going to be absolutely fine. So first of all, I need to cut my 2.5 inch strips from all the fat quarters that I've got in my little bundle, so I'm going to get on with that. So I've made some rough calculations, and I've worked out that I think I need 4 strips of each fabric. So we shall see how that goes. Right, I've now cut a load of strips out, so I've got 4 each. If it doesn't work out, I'll put on the screen exactly what you need to cut out so that it's a little bit less sort of daunting. I do not like wasting fabric. Next thing I need to do is cut out the actual panel on here so that it's a little bit easier. So I'm not going to cut it right to the line, but I'm just going to cut round it so that I've got the straps separate, and just with a pair of scissors. I'm going to use my big ones today, I think. There is quite a lot of excess wadding on here actually. You can see there's quite a strip at the end here. You could use that for a notions pouch or something. So I'm going to cut close to the line So I'm leaving about 1/2 inch all the way around the actual blue line, so I've got a bit of extra bit of leeway there. And that is all extra that's left over, so that's good. That could be used for something else. It's a decent size to be able to make something with. Cut round it all around here, and then I'll get back to you when I'm going to start putting the lining piece on. I'm just giving my fabric for the backing a bit of a press before I then layer it up with the actual wadding piece. Right, that one is now pressed. I'm going to turn it so it's got the wrong side up. So we want the print side to be up. It says in the instructions to spray baste this together, but I don't really like using spray basters. I feel like if I pin it, it'll be fine. I just need to make sure that I spend the time getting it all nice and neat and pinning it together before I then stitch it. It does sort of stick to the fabric anyway, so, and it's only a small area. If it was a bigger area, then I would be more concerned. But just for this, I think that's all right. So what I've done is I've made sure that the backing fabric covers the outside line, the blue line, and that's plenty of space. I'm actually going to cut this bit off down this end. Let's get my rotary cutter out. I'm not cutting it in a mega straight line, just to make it a bit easier. So I've got this bit left here, which can be used for something else, and I haven't wasted a whole sort of 3/4 of a metre cutting this. I am just going to use standard pins to hold my layers together. You could use the sort of safety style pins if you wanted to, but just for quickness I'm going to use this. I'm going to pin it all the way around the outside because I am going to be stitching around that outside blue line just to secure it nicely, and make sure that it then is in place for when we're starting to do our sort of quilt-as-you-go method bit. Right, so I've got it all pinned out. I'm going to stitch along this outside blue line. It says to use a contrast thread so you can sort of follow that line, and I think you're going to cut that out in the later stages, but this is joining the lining fabric with the wadding so that you haven't got to worry about it sort of moving later. Alright, so I have it all stitched. You can see how I've stitched it all the way around the blue line, and I can cut on that line later or just outside of it, so I keep the stitches intact. Right, so there's numbers on these panels, and you can see that I need to put my first strip on number 1 here. I haven't cut my strips down yet, but I will do once I've sort of put it in place. So the actual lines are where your fabric is supposed to lay, not where your stitching lines are, like you would do if you were doing foundation piecing. So it does make it a little bit easier, I think. So I've just laid that in place. I'll trim that, and then I can put the next piece on the top, ready for piece 2. Piece 2 is supposed to go here. So I'm just going to trim that on the line so it sits right on that space. I've got a bit left over from the strip, so my next colour I'm going to do is this pink one, I think, and I'm going to lay that right sides together along the edge. So I'm going to pop some pins in there so I can see where I'm supposed to sew. I'm going to sew 1/4 of an inch from this edge here, and then I'm going to trim this piece afterwards, so that I don't trim it incorrectly. It does say to use spray basting in the pattern and in the video of your first piece, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to pin it into place. So I'm just going to stitch along here, and then I can flip it and then put the next one on. Right, I've now stitched that in place. I'm going to flip that, and it lays nicely in section 2. Which is lovely. I've got my little roller that I'm going to use to finger press. I do like using the rollers. I've got some on the website that are a little bit cheaper than the clover, which is always good. once I've done that, I'm trimming this piece down. You could of course trim this to the length before you've actually stitched it, really. It might make it a bit easier, or I don't know. Anyway, and there's the first two pieces. Next piece I need to do is number 3 here, which is the same method. Stitch it down right sides together, flip it, and then we've got 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and I'm going to carry on like that and hopefully have this all completed in a matter of seconds as you're watching this. This has turned out to be quite a lot of fun. What I've been doing is that I've been putting 2 pieces, pinning those in place, stitching them, coming back and then pressing them at the same time to sort of save time a little bit. So I'm on my second one this side, but it is looking good. Very, very easy, I think, and great that you've got the video tutorial already up, and then I've got this one as well to help you along your way as well. You've got to find the way that you like to do it. Obviously people do things slightly differently. If you like to use the glue basting, that's absolutely fine. It's just not something I love doing, to be quite honest. But here we go, next stitch in line. So I've just started doing the sections at the side, and I've just laid the pieces out that I've got left to make sure that I don't need to join any, because it'd be better if it wasn't joined. I've had to swap out the sort of order that I was doing on this main part to make sure that the pieces were long enough. So I've just sort of put them against where I'm going to put them, just to make sure they're long enough either side, and I think they are now. So I'm going to put them to one side and then start attaching them, and now I know that there's enough. So 4 strips of each colour is enough if you just sort of switch the order around a little bit, and I think I've got the colour balance pretty good. So I'm going to get those sewed on. Right, so I have done all the piecing on the front, which looks like this. It looks a bit of a funny shape here because there's going to be a sort of cut for the box bottom on that side. But you can see that the quilting is done all in the back. So what I'm going to do is cut along just outside the stitch line that we did on the previous, when we were tacking the backing fabric on there, and just to trim all the edges nice and neat. So I'll do that from this side and use my quilting ruler to cut along the edges to neaten it all up. So I'm just cutting into where the notch is now for the box bottom. Trying not to cut into those stitches so that they're still there. Do the same the other side. Right, so I'm trimmed up. Look at that. So it's going to look like something like this when it's finished. Isn't that cool? So, next thing I need to do is cut out the straps from the wadding material. So I've now cut my strap to 30 inches like it says in the instructions, and cut out the strips of wadding to go on the straps as well. What I'm going to do, obviously I need to cut out some longer strips so that I can recover these. So what I'm going to do is I've cut 3 strips from the fat quarters of each of the yellow fabrics and pink fabrics. I'm going to join these together so that I'll have enough length to do the straps with, because obviously the original pattern, it says you need the full width of the fabric. You would have had plenty, but if I sew 2 pieces together on each, that should be enough. So I'm going to do, if I sew the 3 pieces and then cut that in half, and then I can wrap both the wadding and the strapping in those 2 different fabrics. I'm joining these pieces on the diagonal, so from corner to corner, so that the bulk of the seam isn't all in one place. So that's one done. I'm going to do the same to the other piece to make a joint of 3. Then I'll trim the seams to 1/4 of an inch and give them a press ready to wrap the straps. So I've spread the seams out so it's not very bulky. I'm going to do that for all of them. So I have ended up having to join another extra bit onto 2 of these, just scraps left over from before. So 2 full width of the fat quarter strips, and then a smaller section as well, the sort of biggest sections I had left, and then I've cut them down to 33 inches in length so that I can then wrap them in the webbing for this yellow one and then the wadding for the pink. So I've cut these 2.5 inch strips for the actual cotton webbing, but I should have done 2 inches. So it's 2.5 inch strips for the wadding and 2 inches for the actual webbing. So I need to cut this down 1/2 inch so I haven't got so much excess fabric. So made a bit of a mistake, but thankfully I can just trim it and make it to the right size. So I did try pinning the first one, but it's just too fiddly. So I've got some glue, fabric glue, and I've just started basting this in place, and it is so much easier. So I just sort of fold the one side in, pop a bit of glue on it, and then fold it tightly together, and it makes a much neater finish than when I was trying to pin it. It is a lot easier. So I'm going to do that all the way along, and it encapsulates it nicely. So I'm going to do the same with the wadding as well, with the pink fabric. So I'm pressing a 1/2 inch seam on either end of this before you start encapsulating, and there will be a gap at either end because it's the way you attach it to the actual bag section. So I straighten it up, and then I can start. If I draw all the way along one side, and then I can go along and fold it all in. Much easier than pinning. And if I do one side at a time, I'm less likely to get glue on myself. I've still got glue on myself though, don't worry. That's one side done. Here we are, that's the pink one encapsulated. I'm going to put that on the top and stick that in place. So I'll just glue all the way along the yellow narrower piece that's got the cotton webbing inside, and then I can glue it in place before I top stitch it. I've just lined up both ends and trying to get it central. There we go. And I'm going to top stitch that 1/8 of an inch either side of this middle piece, and it'll hold it together nicely. So before I put the straps onto the main body of the bag, I need to sew the bag together. Now the bag pattern says to put the long sides together, right sides together, and to stitch down here, or you can add a zigzag stitch to stop the edges from fraying. So I'm going to actually put some binding on the inside to make it nice and neat, because I can't bear just doing zigzag stitch. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to cut some strips about 15 inches long so that I can bind these 2 edges, and I need to also get some binding cut for the top edge of the bag as well. Right, so I have cut 3 2-inch strips to go round to bind the inside of the bag. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just hem up 1/2 inch down one side of all 3 strips, and then I can stitch this onto the actual seam as I'm stitching it, and then it can be wrapped around and top stitched. Theoretically this should work, we shall see. So I am trimming the seam allowance to 1/4 of an inch, and then I can wrap it around the seam and top stitch it so it's all nice and neat. So I'm just stitching in the ditch on the side that I attach first to then attach the other side down so that you can't see the stitches. You can see from the opposite side to where I'm stitching, this is the bit that I've turned over, and the stitch line that I've been stitching from this side holds the back of that down. So that now has made a nice enclosed seam on the inside. I'm going to do the same for the other side, and then I'm going to do the same for the box bottom as well. Hopefully it won't be too bulky. Right, now to enclose the boxed bottoms, I've cut a couple of 4.5-inch strips that were left over from the bits that I joined the side panels with. 4.5 inches long, and I'm going to do a 1/2-inch seam allowance both sides so that I've got 3 edges that are turned in, so that when I stitch it on the end I can then wrap that round as well. Same principle as the other one. Right, so I've got my little tab there with the 1/2 inch folded in each side and on that edge. And if I stitch 1/2 inch from the edge of the work, trim the seam allowance and then wrap it round and top stitch like I did with the side seams, that should work hopefully, fingers crossed. Right, so now I've wrapped it round. I'm going to do the same top stitch on this side to catch that inside, excuse the threads, and then it'll enclose the seam completely, but just makes it a little bit tidier. Right, so I have enclosed all the seams, look. I'm going to turn it the right way, but before then I'm just going to give it a quick press along the seams, just being careful not to burn my arm. Just to tidy it up a bit. There we go, just to flatten the seams up. I'm going to turn it the right way. That's looking good. What we need to do next is bind the top of the bag as well. I have got a tutorial on how I bind things, so I'm not going to go through this in detail, but I've got a 2.5-inch strip. I've actually joined 2 pieces that were cut from the fat quarter in my usual way. 2.5-inch strip folded in half and pressed, and then I'm going to pin it all the way along on the inside of the bag, stitched most of the way around, leaving a 6-inch gap. Then I'm going to join those 2 ends together, stitch that flat to the inside of the bag, then bring that material over the top and top stitch on the front so that I don't have to hand stitch, but you could do it the opposite way. My original tutorial shows you how to sort of do the front and then fold it onto the back and hand sew it, but I'm just going to sew it to the inside, fold it outside, and then I could top stitch it on the machine. Once I get to the top stitching stage, I'll show you some clips of that, but I will leave some links to my binding tutorial in the description bar down below. So there we are, I've pinned that to the inside most of the way round. I have got a gap there that I'm going to leave open until I've joined these 2 ends, so I'll go ahead and do that. Right, so I've got that joined all on the inside. I will leave a link to that tutorial where I show you how I sort of join that end in. But now I'm going to press this out on the inside so that I get a nice neat edge. I've done a 1/4 inch seam allowance as in the pattern on the instructions as well. And this should tidy up the top edge of the bag. Right, now I've done that, I'm going to pin this to the front and then I can top stitch it. Right, so I've now top stitched the edge there, which looks nice and neat, and I need to place my straps. So the pattern says to place them 5 inches from the end of each side, so I'm going to pin them there, stitch them 1/2 inch from the end along this line just through the inside of the bag, and then once I've stitched that down I can turn it up and top stitch it on the outside as well on this edge to completely enclose the edges. So I'm going to pin that in place first, 5 inches from the edge. There we are, those are all pinned in place, ready to go on the sewing machine. I'm literally going to do 1/2 inch seam allowance from there, stitch it, turn it over and then top stitch it. I'll show you how that looks. Trim the ends. I'm literally going to pull that this way, finger press it into place, and then I can top stitch right on the edge of the bag so that this stays up. Oh, that looks really nice. So that's one of the handles attached. I'm going to do the same with the other 3, and then I'll be able to show you what it looks like finished. So there we are, the bag is finished. I have managed to do it in the 5 fat quarters plus the 1/2 metre of lining in my fabrics. So if you have got, if you have purchased the fat quarter bundle from me, or any of the fat quarters I'm releasing this year, you'll be able to make this with it, as long as you've got some lining fabric from the inside. You could potentially piece some of the pieces that are left over, because there's quite a decent sized piece of a few of them, but I don't think you'd have quite enough. But of course you could just use a calico or something on the inside. So couple of these materials I've still got quite a bit left of. But like I said, because I cut my 1/2 metre on the generous size, so it comes up to 20.5 inches, you've then got enough to line the bag as well, and then I've had enough to do the binding on the inside. So all you'll need out of my fabrics, out of the Liberty cottons, is 1/2 metre of lining and a fat quarter bundle to make this, as well as the kit of course. So I have got these ones for the diagonal strips like I've made, or I have got another kit where the stripes are in a different orientation. So this one's called the Sophie Tote, and this is called the Alexandra Tote. So there's 2 different options, but they are the same size, so I should imagine you'll be able to get the same out of 5 fat quarters as well. So you get, in the kits, you get the wadding, the pattern instructions and the strap. And then obviously I've put together the 5 fat quarters to make this, and the 1/2 metre. So I will actually give the option to purchase the same fabrics as this one if you'd like them on my website, and I'll leave a link to that in the description bar down below. But it's a really nice shaped bag actually, great for shopping, especially if you're going to a quilt show or a yarn show. I'm definitely going to make one of these again. This one has already been decided that it's my mum's, because she's seen the fabrics already and absolutely loves them, so I think she's going to have it. But there we go, that's another option for doing something with your fat quarters, your 5 fat quarters monthly subscription from the Liberty selection that I've selected anyway. So this one is April's selection of fabrics, but I have sold out of some of the previous months, so if you want these colours you need to probably purchase them quite soon. But there we go, that is the project that I recommend for this month, and I hope you enjoyed watching, and you could potentially do something similar yourself if you don't want to buy the actual wadding with the lines drawn on them, but it gives you an idea. So the monthly fat quarter bundles that I normally do, you can buy 1 month if you want to, but you can subscribe, which will then take the money out of your account every month, so you don't need to worry that you're going to miss out. But there are still some spots available for the subscriptions. But again, if you just want the 1 month because you like that particular colour scheme, it's completely up to you. So there we go. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you'd like to see more, and I shall be back next week with a podcast video showing you what I've been making in the last couple of weeks. So I'll see you then. Bye!